There comes a moment in life when simply surviving is no longer enough, when getting through the day, paying the bills, keeping quiet, and avoiding risk starts to cost you more than it saves you. Survival can feel responsible. It can feel smart. It can feel like the safest option. But sometimes surviving slowly becomes the most dangerous thing you can do. Surviving keeps you breathing, but it doesn't always keep you alive. It teaches you how to endure pain, how to tolerate disrespect, how to shrink your dreams so they fit inside your fear. You wake up, do what you must, go to sleep, and repeat. On the outside, everything looks stable. On the inside, something is fading. When you live in survival mode for too long, your standards drop. You accept situations you once promised yourself you never would. You stay in places that drain you because leaving feels risky. You hold on to relationships that hurt because loneliness feels worse. You call it being practical, but deep down you know it's fear wearing the mask of responsibility. Survival mode trains you to think small. It convinces you that wanting more is selfish, unrealistic, or dangerous. It tells you to be grateful for scraps and quiet your hunger for purpose. Over time, you stop asking big questions. You stop imagining a different life. You stop believing you deserve more than just getting by. But here is the truth most people avoid. Surviving is not the same as being safe. Emotional numbness is not peace. Stability without growth is not security. Comfort that costs you your self-respect is not protection. It's a slow erosion of who you are. There are situations where surviving actually puts you at risk. Staying silent in environments that crush your spirit, staying still when your potential is screaming for movement, staying small when your soul is starving for challenge. The danger isn't always dramatic or loud. Sometimes it's quiet, slow, and polite. Sometimes it looks like routine. Growth feels unsafe at first. Change feels terrifying. Stepping into the unknown feels like danger because you can't control it. But what's truly unsafe is spending your entire life hiding from the very things that could make you stronger, freer, and more alive. There comes a point when you must choose to continue surviving or risk living. One keeps you comfortable but empty. The other feels uncertain but meaningful. Survival keeps you stuck in yesterday. Living demands courage today. Surviving often disguises itself as safety. On the surface, it looks responsible, disciplined, and mature. You tell yourself you're being realistic, that you're avoiding unnecessary risk, that you're protecting what little stability you have. But beneath that appearance of safety, there is frequently a deep, unspoken fear controlling your decisions. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of losing approval, fear of stepping into something unfamiliar and discovering you are not ready. When fear runs your life, it doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers. It convinces you to stay where you are because at least you know what to expect. It encourages you to accept discomfort because uncertainty feels worse. Over time, this fear builds a cage that looks like common sense. You stop asking whether you are fulfilled and start asking only whether you are okay enough to continue. Survival feels safe because it minimizes exposure. You don't reach too high so you can't fall far. You don't speak up so you can't be rejected. You don't try so you can't fail. But what you call safety is often avoidance. You are not protected from pain. You are just postponing a different kind of pain. The pain of regret, of wasted potential, of knowing you played small when you could have grown. This hidden fear slowly reshapes your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who must be careful rather than someone who can be powerful. You lower expectations, not because you want less, but because wanting more feels dangerous. Dreams start to feel unrealistic, even childish. You convince yourself that survival is enough, even when your inner voice knows it isn't. The most dangerous part is how normal this becomes. Fear stops feeling like fear and starts feeling like wisdom. Staying quiet feels mature, settling feels humble, enduring feels strong, but strength that is building on fear is fragile. It keeps you alive, but it never lets you expand. Survival mode is designed to protect your body, not your spirit. It focuses on getting through the day, meeting basic demands, and avoiding anything that could threaten your sense of control. You wake up with one goal: make it to the end of the day without everything falling apart. In this state, emotional needs are treated as luxuries, not necessities. Joy, creativity, connection, and purpose are pushed aside in favor of endurance. When you live like this for too long, you stop listening to your emotions. You numb yourself to disappointment because feeling it would slow you down. You ignore sadness because there's no time to process. You suppress excitement because hope feels risky. Over time, you become functional but empty. You are doing what is required, but nothing feels meaningful anymore. Survival mode teaches you to prioritize efficiency over fulfillment. You choose what is practical. Even when it drains you, you stay busy so you don't have to feel. You fill your schedule, your phone, your mind with noise because silence would force you to confront what's missing. On the outside, you appear strong and composed. On the inside, you are emotionally undernourished. This emotional starvation shows up in subtle ways. You feel disconnected from yourself. You struggle to feel deeply, whether it's happiness or sadness. Moments that should move you barely register. You laugh, but it feels shallow. You rest, but you don't feel restored. Life becomes something you manage instead of something you experience. The longer survival mode lasts, the more you forget what emotional fullness feels like. You start to believe this numbness is normal adulthood. You convince yourself that passion fades, excitement is childish, and contentment means silence inside. But emotional hunger doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. Growing stronger, shaping your choices, and quietly reminding you that being alive is more than just breathing. Endurance is often praised as strength. You are told to stay tough, to hold on, and to push through no matter what. And for a while, endurance is necessary. It helps you survive hard seasons, temporary struggles, and moments of uncertainty. But when endurance becomes a lifestyle rather than a phase, something inside you begins to erode. You start enduring things that are no longer shaping you, only shrinking you. When you endure without growing, you send yourself a silent message of, "This is all I deserve." Each time you tolerate disrespect, stagnation, or emotional neglect, your self-respect takes a small hit. You may not notice it at first. It doesn't collapse all at once. It wears down slowly, like friction against stone, until one day you no longer recognize the person you've become. You begin to confuse patience with powerlessness. You tell yourself you're being strong by staying, by waiting, by not rocking the boat. But deep down, you know you are avoiding a harder truth, that growth would require uncomfortable action. Endurance feels easier because it demands nothing new from you, only your silence and your time. As self-respect fades, your internal dialogue changes. You stop advocating for yourself. You stop setting boundaries. You stop believing your needs matter. You accept situations that conflict with your values because challenging them would require courage you've been trained not to use. The more you endure and the less you expect from life and the less you expect from yourself. True strength is not endless tolerance. Real strength is knowing when endurance is building you and when it is breaking you. Growth demands movement, learning, and risk. Without it, endurance becomes self-betrayal, a slow agreement to live beneath your potential. Fear rarely presents itself as panic or weakness. More often, it shows up sounding reasonable, logical, and mature. It tells you to be careful, to wait, to think it through one more time. It wraps itself in words like responsibility, stability, and practicality. On the surface, it seems like wisdom. Underneath, it is hesitation fueled by the fear of uncertainty. You tell yourself you're being responsible by staying where you are, even when you feel unfulfilled. You say you're being practical by avoiding risk, even when those risks are necessary for growth. Fear convinces you that wanting more is reckless, that stepping outside what you know could cost you everything. It magnifies worst case scenarios and minimizes the cost of staying stuck. This disguised fear becomes dangerous because it feels justified. It allows you to explain your inaction without confronting your insecurity. You can point to bills, expectations, timing, and obligations as reasons you can't move forward yet. While those concerns may be real, fear uses them as shields to prevent you from asking a deeper question: am I protecting my future or just protecting my comfort? Over time, this mindset narrows your world. You begin to choose options that feel safe rather than ones that feel aligned. You prioritize certainty over meaning. You trade potential for predictability. Each decision seems small, but together they shape a life built more on avoidance than intention. Fear disguised as responsibility slowly erodes courage. You stop trusting yourself to handle challenges. You begin to believe safety comes from control rather than growth. And without realizing it, you allow fear to become the quiet decision maker behind your choices. Comfort is often seen as the reward for hard work, something to strive for and protect at all costs. At first, comfort feels like relief. There is less struggle, fewer surprises, and a sense of predictability. But when comfort exists without purpose, direction, or growth, it slowly turns into confinement. What once felt safe begins to feel suffocating. In this state, days start blending together. You follow the same routines, have the same conversations, and face the same limitations. Nothing is terribly wrong, but nothing feels deeply right either. Because there is no immediate pain, you convince yourself that everything is fine. Yet beneath the surface, there is a quiet dissatisfaction that never fully goes away. Comfort without purpose dulls your ambition. You stop pushing yourself because pushing disrupts ease. You stop questioning your path because quest threatens stability. The desire to stay comfortable becomes stronger than the desire to grow. Over time, you begin protecting your routine more than your potential. This kind of comfort also weakens your sense of identity. When you are no longer challenged, you stop discovering new parts of yourself. Your world shrinks to what is familiar and manageable. You become defined by what you avoid rather than what you pursue. The prison is quiet because there are no visible bars, only habits, excuses, and routines that keep you contained. The most dangerous part is how easy it is to accept this state as a final destination. You tell yourself this is just how life is supposed to feel. You mistake emotional stagnation for peace. And without realizing it, comfort becomes the very thing that limits your freedom. Comfort is often seen as the reward for hard work, something to strive for and protect at all costs. At first, comfort feels like relief. There is less struggle, fewer surprises, and a sense of predictability. But when comfort exists without purpose, direction, or growth, it slowly turns into confinement. What once felt safe begins to feel suffocating. In this state, days start blending together. You follow the same routines, have the same conversations, and face the same limitations. Nothing is terribly wrong, but nothing feels deeply right either. Because there is no immediate pain, you convince yourself that everything is fine. Yet beneath the surface, there is a quiet dissatisfaction that never fully goes away. Comfort without purpose dulls your ambition. You stop pushing yourself because pushing disrupts ease. You stop questioning your path because questioning threatens stability. The desire to stay comfortable becomes stronger than the desire to grow. Over time, you begin protecting your routine more than your potential. This kind of comfort also weakens your sense of identity. When you are no longer challenged, you stop discovering new parts of yourself. Your world shrinks to what is familiar and manageable. You become defined by what you avoid rather than what you pursue. The prison is quiet because there are no visible bars, only habits, excuses, and routines that keep you contained. The most dangerous part is how easy it is to accept this state as a final destination. You tell yourself this is just how life is supposed to feel. You mistake emotional stagnation for peace. And without realizing it, comfort becomes the very thing that limits your freedom. Stability is often presented as the ultimate goal, a steady income, predictable routine, and minimal disruption. On the surface, it looks like success. But when stability comes at the cost of ambition, curiosity, and growth, it stops being protective and starts becoming restrictive. True security should support your evolution, not silence your drive. When stability kills ambition, you begin settling for what is guaranteed instead of what is possible. You stop setting bold goals because they threaten the balance you've worked hard to maintain. Dreams that once energized you now feel inconvenient. You tell yourself that ambition is risky, unnecessary, or unrealistic, even though it once gave your life direction. This type of stability creates a false sense of safety. You may feel financially or socially secure, but internally you feel stagnant. There is no forward momentum, only maintenance. You are busy preserving what you have, not building toward what you could become. Over time, this creates frustration, boredom, and a quiet resentment toward your own choices. Ambition is not recklessness. It is a signal of growth. When you suppress it, you suppress your natural drive to expand, learn, and contribute more. Stability that discourages ambition teaches you to play small, to avoid challenge, and to accept limits that were never meant to be permanent. Real security allows movement. It gives you a foundation from which to explore, not a cage that keeps you still. When stability requires you to abandon your ambition, it stops protecting your future and starts preserving your fear. A silence is often mistaken for peace. You stay quiet to avoid conflict, to keep things stable, to prevent situations from getting worse. You convince yourself that not speaking up is the mature choice. That enduring quietly makes you stronger, wiser, or more disciplined. But when the situation you are silent in is harming you, that silence slowly turns into betrayal of yourself. Each time you swallow your words, you teach yourself that your voice doesn't matter. You tell your mind and your heart that your discomfort is less important than other people's comfort. Over time, this creates an internal divide. The part of you that knows something is wrong becomes disconnected from the part of you that acts. You begin living in contradiction, aware of the harm, yet participating in it through silence. Harmful environments thrive on quiet compliance. When you don't speak, the behavior continues. When you don't set boundaries, disrespect becomes routine. Silence doesn't stop the damage, it only hides it. The cost is paid internally through anxiety, resentment, self-doubt, and a growing sense of powerlessness. What you don't express outwardly turns inward and starts shaping how you see yourself. Staying silent also trains others how to treat you. When you don't object, people assume consent. When you don't defend your limits, those limits disappear. Over time, you are no longer seen as someone with boundaries, but as someone who can be pushed, ignored, or overlooked. And slowly, you begin to see yourself the same way. Self-betrayal is not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like nodding when you want to say no. Sometimes it looks like smiling while feeling diminished. Sometimes it looks like telling yourself it's not that bad when your body and mind are clearly suffering. The longer you remain silent, the harder it becomes to remember that you deserve to be heard. Survival mode conditions your mind to adapt instead of transform. When your primary goal is to get through the day, you stop asking whether your circumstances are right or wrong and focus only on whether they are manageable. You begin adjusting yourself to fit into situations that are slowly wearing you down rather than questioning why you should have to live that way in the first place. Tolerance becomes a habit. You tolerate exhaustion because rest feels unproductive. You tolerate disrespect because confrontation feels risky. You tolerate stagnation because change feels overwhelming. Over time, what once felt unacceptable starts to feel normal. You don't notice the shift happening. It happens quietly through repetition. The mind learns to endure instead of demand better. This tolerance slowly dulls your sense of possibility. You stop imagining alternatives because imagining creates discomfort. If you can't change something immediately, you train yourself not to want it at all. Desire begins to feel dangerous, even pointless. So you lower expectations, not because you are satisfied, but because wanting more feels like a liability. Survival also teaches you to blame yourself instead of your circumstances. When something feels wrong, you assume the problem is you. that you need to be tougher, quieter, more patient. You internalize the burden of environments that were never designed to support you. Instead of changing what harms you, you change yourself to withstand it. The tragedy of survival-based tolerance, that it keeps you functional while quietly limiting your future. You remain capable enough to continue, but never empowered enough to evolve. The longer you tolerate what should be changed, the harder it becomes to recognize that you were meant for more than endurance. Survival mode doesn't change your standards all at once. It lowers them gradually, almost invisibly. At first, you compromise just for now. You accept less rest, less respect, less fulfillment because you believe it's temporary. But survival has a way of turning short-term compromises into long-term patterns. When your focus is on getting through rather than growing, standards start to feel optional. You stop expecting fairness because demanding it feels exhausting. You stop expecting excellence because it requires energy you don't think you have. What once felt unacceptable becomes tolerable, and what becomes tolerable eventually feels normal. This shift affects every area of life. In work, you settle for roles that don't challenge or value you. In relationships, you accept inconsistency, emotional distance, or disrespect because stability feels more important than connection. In personal goals, you aim lower, telling yourself it's better to succeed at something small than risk failing at something meaningful. Lowered standards quietly reshape your self-image. You begin to see yourself as someone who must accept less rather than someone who deserves more. Confidence fades not because you are incapable, but because you've trained yourself not to expect better. The more you adapt to less, the harder it becomes to remember a version of yourself who once wanted more. Survival mode teaches you to negotiate with dissatisfaction instead of confronting it. You learn how to cope rather than how to elevate. And over time, living beneath your standards feels safer than reaching for what aligns with who you truly are. When you spend too long in survival mode, the idea of wanting more begins to feel dangerous or unrealistic. You start telling yourself that your dreams are too big, your goals are too risky, and your expectations are unreasonable. Slowly, you begin to accept less, not because it's what you truly want, but because it feels safer than reaching for more. Over time, this acceptance becomes habitual, shaping the way you see yourself and the world around you. Accepting less changes your mindset. You stop imagining possibilities outside your current reality. You no longer envision a life full of growth, passion, or fulfillment because imagining it feels risky. Instead, you focus on what is achievable without discomfort, without challenge, without fear of failure. You trade excitement for predictability and purpose for convenience. This normalization of less doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in through small compromises. You compromise in your work, in relationships, in personal goals, and in your self-care. Each compromise feels minor at first, but as they accumulate, they create a life that looks acceptable on the surface while leaving you quietly unfulfilled on the inside. Over time, your internal compass shifts. You start measuring success by what you can tolerate rather than what you truly desire. Ambition feels irresponsible, passion feels impractical, and striving for more feels like a rebellion against safety. You convince yourself that contentment is what you should aim for, when in reality, it is a mask for resignation. Accepting less also impacts your energy and motivation. When you stop believing in more, you stop pushing for more. Initiative fades, creativity is stifled, and potential is left dormant. The life you once imagined as possible begins to feel like a distant memory, and you begin to define yourself by the limitations you have quietly embraced rather than the possibilities you once dreamed of. When surviving is no longer safe, the choice becomes clear. You continue enduring, shrinking, and settling, or you can rise, risk, and reclaim your life. Survival keeps you alive, but living makes you whole. Growth feels uncertain, change feels uncomfortable, and stepping into the unknown feels dangerous. But so does the slow erosion of your dreams, your self-respect, and your joy. You were never meant to simply endure. You were meant to challenge yourself, to stretch beyond comfort, to face fear with courage, and to build a life that excites and fulfills you. Let survival be the starting point, not the destination. Let it teach you resilience, but never allow it to define your limits. The moment you recognize that surviving is costing you more than living, that is the moment you reclaim your power. Stand up. Speak out. Walk away from what diminishes you. Step toward what inspires you. Risk the uncertainty, because what lies on the other side is not just life. It is your life, fully lived, fully owned, fully yours. Do not settle for safe survival. Choose bold living. Choose yourself.